Well, hello. Yes, I started early today. Just a bit, because I feel like we're going to need a little bit of extra time to really tenderize the meat. And I don't want to do the pressure cook this time for them. I want them to simmer in the rest of it. So, full length this time. Let me grab things. I laid all my stuff out on the table over here this time. So I'll have to continually go and transfer things in. Out of my freezer, a little bit of beef boneless short rib. And while I was out scouting around, I happened upon a chunk of chuck. Marketed as a steak, but I don't think chuck steak is a very good steak. I do think chuck is a good meat for stewing. And in fact, if I was just going to recommend a meat to get for the thing I'm making today, it would be chuck. Short ribs are very tasty, but they're often a little bit less available or cheap than a piece of chuck. Although in this case, the chucks, I got these far enough apart that the price of the chuck pre-discount is more than the price of the short ribs. So we're going to do all beef. I was going to throw in some pork. What I went out to do is see if I could find a nice cheap piece of like pork shoulder, throw in there to bulk it up a little bit. I found a piece of chuck on discount, so we're going to do all beef today. And otherwise, yeah, I'm making chili. Should be pretty chill. Haha. Jokes. Let's see, I also got this canned beef broth that I wasn't expecting to have. We're going to use canned beef broth to start it off. Canned beef broth to start it off because it was 50 cents. And it'll add a little bit of beefiness. So, I think we're going to manage a two-pan thing. We're going to have one big pot where all the stuff goes in and becomes the chili. And then we're going to have a second one where we fry off individual things before transferring them into the pot. I mean, y'all know how to make chili. It's not that complicated. Yep. Come on there, bud. There we go. Boeuf. Le boeuf. I should get out my pot. I think we're going to grab the Dutch oven to be the actual one where the chili gets chillified. Because it's got a nice lid on it. And then a medium stainless pan as we fry off a bunch of individual items. Now, there's no reason to do cast irons for these. So, to start us off, into our Dutch oven goes our beef broth starting. Which is essentially just slightly watered down beef stock. Which is fine. I'm going to keep that can handy. And we're going to start heating that to bring it to a simmer right away. Um, Actually, I'm going to put in an additional can of water. Because I know I'm going to need to add liquid. And I can always cook it back out if I add too much. Benefits of these long stewed things. Which brings us to our first real ingredient. Chilies. Now, most American chili recipes will call for chili powder. And what they're effectively doing is mimicking the process of using real chilies. Let's neaten up our blade a little bit. Because the original chili con carne, is stewed chili peppers, usually a variety of them, with meat. Ria, hi. Welcome in. Yeah, I started early, a little early today. I was wondering if anybody was going to notice. There's a couple of things that need stewing, so I wanted to make sure I had enough time. This one's just got to get that stem bit out. Hello, how's it going? Welcome, welcome. And we're knocking all the seeds out of these guys. Or at least the vast majority of the seeds out of these guys. We don't really want any extra spice. The main thing the seeds give you is going to be extra heat. Even for the milder of our peppers, none of these are, other than the bell peppers, none of these are going to be truly sweet peppers, so they are going to bring extra heat, and that's mostly in the seeds. But we're using anchos, and I picked up one I've never had before, pasillas. So I'm going to try those out. Otherwise, de-seeding a big pepper like this, that one was awkward because I couldn't get the top off. But essentially, you just give a little cut near the stem, and the stem and a little bit of the surroundings tears off. And then all the seeds just kind of fall out. And then if you don't want your seeds, you scoop them into your hand and dump them in the compost. I am going with beans. This is my version of chili, and I like beans in my chili. But also, the purpose of beans in chili, the underlying purpose of beans in chili, is they provide bulk. They give you more to eat, and you use then strong flavors and some of the more flavorful pieces of meat so that you then add less meat. And in the current environment, beef is pretty expensive. So I am going to be adding beans. I like beans. And beans, in a literal sense, chili con carne does not have beans in it. But, come on. It wouldn't be unheard of in ancestral Mexico to be putting beans in such a thing, because they had beans, and beans then serve the same purpose they do now. They're a protein option that is way easier to get a hold of, is much more cost effective than just a big slab of meat. We are using canned beans rather than cooking up some fresh ones, which I think for something like a chili is fine, because we're going to end up cooking them down pretty heavily on top of them already being cooked. So having that firmer bean of a homemade one, not really important here. Wasteland Puppy TV, hello. Hello, hello, welcome, welcome. You finally catch a stream. I am indeed on a little bit early today to give us time for stewing. I'm just kind of dicing the peppers. Dried peppers like this are quite leathery. And if I was pressure cooking, I would throw these in with the meat at the pressure cooking stage to really let them soften. They really need to be rehydrated and stewed, both to soften up to the point where you can eat them, and also to really extract the flavors. Tomato paste with pureed tomato. No, I'm using canned tomato, but I'm using a diced canned tomato. I want this to be chunky. I'm not really going for a smooth. My chili, I want it to be really kind of a... Obviously, the chunks aren't going to be huge chunks, but they're going to be chunky chunks. Mushrooms are also a good shout. Again, they'll give you savoriness, they'll give you some protein, they'll give you some bulk. Really, I think the big argument of no beans in your chili, first of all, it comes from Texas. And it comes from Texas specifically in a time period when beef was super abundant and super affordable. So there was no real reason to not use beef. And now they're just snobbish about it. Beans are an affordability pick. Beans are always an affordability pick. They're tasty, but in terms of like putting them in a meat-based thing, you're fooling yourself if you're not admitting that they are an affordability pick. Ooh. This is the first time I've used this kind of chili, and they're definitely a little trickier to seed out. It smells really nice, though. It's smoky. I can a little bit of heat on the nose. Oh, I have some dried tomatoes. We could actually do that. We have some dried tomatoes. If I can find them. I have some dried tomatoes and actually some dried sweet bell peppers. Fresh tomatoes have glutamic acid in them too. You typically wake it up by cooking them. And then you add salt, and it forms glutamates, and that's where your strong savory flavors come from in tomatoes. The pasilla is definitely easier to cut than the ancho. Less of a thick hull on it. The anchos get quite leathery when they're dried like that. Easy way to get around that is to just buy powdered, either just chili powder, or if you want to do your special spices, you can get frequently dried ancho as a separate thing. Chicken chili. Yeah, the price of chicken is going up a lot too. Pork is currently the cheapest that I see around, pound for pound. I was actually out looking for a piece of pork shoulder today to accompany the beef, and I just lucked out and found, because I already had that one, short ribs, in the freezer. So they're a little bit freezer burned, good for something stewed like this. I found a piece of chuck, so we're going to throw in some chuck. If you want to go all beef, again, I recommend chuck. That is where I would settle for a beef chili. In terms of affordability to flavor ratio. Short ribs are nice. Brisket would be very good, but I think it would be a little bit extra. And brisket also is not cheap these days. Once upon a time, it was a cheap cut. Not for quite some time now. Okay, that's 2 big anchos and 2 big pasillos. I think we're going to throw in a little bit of arbol, but not too much. Liz! Hola! Chile de arbol, quite punchy little guys. How's it going, Liz? Welcome, welcome. Come on. Pretty good. I've been okay. I've been better. I'm having the folks, my parents, they're visiting this week, so I'm getting ready for them. We're going to cook them something nice. I won't be cooking that one live for you, but I will take photos. I find cooking for the show with somebody in the house awkward. I've tried it a couple times and it just feels real awkward to me. Probably because it's something just very different from what I usually do. Okay, 2 arbols seeded out, same treatment, just gonna zip them up. Arbol is the typical go-to spicy Mexican pepper. They're in the same ballpark as like your bird's eye, your Thai chilies. They're pretty spicy little guys. So I'm only throwing 2 of those in along with my 2 of my larger ones. The chilies all have different flavors and you kind of got to play with them to see what they taste like, to know what they each contribute to a dish like this. Let's slide over. It's on the back corner because I'm going to be cooking things here and then kind of putting them in. But that's probably as many peppers as I think that can handle, since I am adding a bunch of other stuff to it. If I was doing this in like traditional Mexican style, I would be including very little else beyond the peppers and meat and the aromatics. Because it is traditionally, originally, very much a stew. That's also going to start to give me hot gases as it starts to boil. So, but we want to get that up to a simmer and kind of hold it there for a long period of time. Sliding back over, we're also switching cutting boards. Get out your meat cutting boards. And starting with our lightly freezer burned boneless short rib. It's actually lightly still frozen. This is one of the cuts that I seek out in the discount bins. If I see short rib, I will go for it. Because the things I like to use it for are largely stewed, so I can freeze it and not worry about it losing its texture. Because it will lose its texture if you freeze or burn your meat. But it's because it's quite a tough piece. They cut them, the way they cut them, like so, breaks up the fibers. So the fibers here are only that long, but those fibers are quite tough. There's a lot of connective tissue in here and a good amount of fat. There's a lot of flavor to be had in the short ribs. So they're very easy to cut this way because we're separating those fibers from each other. I actually kind of want to cut it into threes. But it needs to be stewed down. There are other ways to cook it, of course. I'm not going to say the only way to cook it is to stew it down, but I think it goes really well with a stewed method. A sharp knife also helps. For tough beef, for any tough meat, but beef is often the toughest meat people will be encountering. You want this guy to do as much of the work as you can before it gets to your mouth, so that your teeth don't have to do that work. I am doing this awkwardly. What I should do is just throw that in the pan right away. And most American chilies these days will call for ground meat because it's way easier to work with. And I'm not going to begrudge anyone for doing that. But ground meat is, first of all, I've never seen ground short rib for sale at my local store. I have seen ground chuck, so I would go for that. I think we're going to have to do this in a couple of little batches. But if you want to get the flavors, and if you want to combine meats, cutting your own will give you nice chunky pieces and also let you include more stuff. So how's everybody doing today? What's kicking? What's new? What's for dinner? I'll call you out by name if nobody answers. Then you'll have to answer, because you'll have been called out. Okay, well, Liz, since you're the last one who said something, how's it going? So, we're dicing up the meat, and we're going to sear it off, brown it off in that frying pan, and then transfer it into our pot with the liquid so that it can simmer away the whole time we're doing other stuff and really soften up. I'm kind of treating this the way I treat a, like, fancy meat ragu. I am going to do it in batches so that I don't end up steaming the meat too badly. Based on this amount, I think we're going to do it in three waves. This piece of chuck, I think, is going to have to get cut down even more so. And then we're going to use the fat that renders out of searing the beef as the oil for all the other sauteing stages, which actually means I want to get this piece in next, because that's got most of our fat. So I probably should have done that first, actually. So yeah, start with whatever your fattiest piece is, because the fat will help lubricate the pan. Ooh, the chuck, which I got on the discount bin, so I'm not surprised at this, but I'm a little surprised that it's more so than the short rib, which I've had longer, but it's been frozen. The chuck definitely is a little on the older side. It has that same thing where the fibers go mostly this way through it. So by cutting it the long ways, letting the knife do the work of cutting these the long ways, by the time we get to eating them, there's only short fibers left. Ooh, it smells beefy back there. My phone made a noise in the other room. get this chopped. We're going to slide over to the stove. We're going to look at the beef. Goal over there is we're getting some browning, because once we start stewing it, there's going to be no more opportunities to get that sort of Maillard browning on the meat, which would mean we would miss out on some of the potential flavors that come from that process. Slide over. And they also, oh yeah, they look good. They also are going to render out some of their fats into our pan. They don't need to be cooked through, they just need to be cooked until they're getting these nice sort of crusty brown bits on the outside. They're going to contribute some fond to our pan that we will pick up later with some of our vegetables. As long as we don't go overboard and burn them. Glad I stopped when I did and didn't overcrowd this pan, because I feel like these definitely would have started to steam. I've got a little bit more of them than I think the pan can handle. And then a second whole piece of meat that definitely would have overcrowded the pan. Red wine to deglaze the pan? Possibly. Red wine. I don't need to deglaze yet. Red wine is definitely a possibility. I could use red wine. I have a bunch of other options. I don't have any tequila. I actually feel like tequila would be an excellent choice here. Okay. Those ones are nice and seared to the brown. So we are just going to put them in the juice. Bring the pan back. And hook it up with our chuck, which is the one I should have started with, but wash my hand real quick. I would like to keep this as a two-pan thing. So hopefully I don't screw that up. If you're not searing off things, if you're not separately frying stuff, chili is definitely a one-pot type of thing. You can, and we could have done that too, honestly. I could have started by searing off the meat in the pot there, and then built everything else on top of that. The only thing that kind of stymies that is the fact that the chilies, well, even that wouldn't be too bad. We would just have to increase our stewing time for the chilies. This could be done as a one pot. Okay. Let those guys sit and get a little bit of browning formed. Oh. Somebody else having for dinner? Regale me with your deliciousnesses. And then I have to consider, so in the Wisconsin tradition, We put macaroni directly in the macaroni noodles directly in the chili. Um, the way I serve chilies typically is with grits. That's my favorite combo, chili and grits. Nana for banana. That's a great name, by the way. Hello, welcome in. How's it going? Good to see you. Uh, what was I saying? Yes. So macaroni in the chili is the Wisconsin thing. I usually go with grits. I was considering, because of the way I'm constructing this, it's going to be very chunky. It's going to be very ragu-like. I'm using a non-stick pan. This is, in fact, stainless steel, and that one is an enameled Dutch oven. But as you can see, the stainless, nothing is sticking, but it is forming a lovely fond on the pan that we will use later. I do use non-stick pans. I actually use them quite frequently, but I don't think they're necessary for this dish, and frankly, you shouldn't use them if they're not necessary. I use them for eggs, that's for dang sure. I hate cooking eggs in a regular pan. I've done it. It's annoying. But how's it going? Welcome in. We're making chili. We're currently browning off our chuck, our cubed chuck, to then be added to my, which is starting to bubble. We're going to simmer it with our chili peppers in the back pot, and we're going to keep adding stuff to that. We're going to make a nice, rich, dense, meaty stew. I'm constructing this in a similar way that I would construct like a ragu. These guys are looking... You've never had chili. Interesting. May I ask where you're from? Because, to my knowledge, chili is a pretty widespread thing, but if you don't want to tell me, that's also perfectly all right. Those are looking pretty okay. What we've done so far is there are 2 of these and 2 of these, although bigger ones than that, diced up in the stock pot there. And then we cubed up our beef. I found some nice budget cuts of beef. This is chuck, that's short rib. And we're getting some browning on it before we throw it in the pot, which also has some beef broth and some water in it thus far. Many things will be added as we go. That's looking pretty good to me. So again, we'll just knock that into our pot. Stir them in. And round 3 with the beef. And we'll get rid of our meaty cutting board. straight away. Your palate is very limited. Oh, well, everyone has things they don't like. I certainly do. Uh, but no shade, no worries. I know plenty of people with either actual dietary restrictions or just some pretty decisive preferences, and I'm happy to accommodate them in cooking. This, of course, is being served to me, so I'm cooking it however I prefer, which is going to be very savory and should be reasonably spicy. But there's probably going to be some controversial picks for what I throw into this. For example, the cocoa powder. We'll add that a little bit later. Any of the guys out here have to come in with me? Yes, the onion. Up next is going to be this onion. Let's put the lid on our chili pot. Okay, those guys are sticking a bit, so I'm going to let them keep frying off until they release. The beef will release itself from the pan as it forms that crust. And the crust is what we want, so. I know, it doesn't sound like it belongs, does it? But it depends who you ask. Mole is a spicy, savory, cocoa-based sauce, and that's where I take my inspiration from for the chocolate. It's not sweetened at all. And likewise, I won't be sweetening it here. Instead, it gives you bitterness and depth. I got one big old white onion. Probably don't even quite need the whole thing, so I'm probably going to save some of it for garnish. Oop! Whoa! What the hell happened there? Well, I guess we're going to core out our white onion because I don't like the looks of that. But the outer layers look fine, so... So we're just going to do this to it and get rid of that little brown center. What the heck happened to that onion, though? Makes our cutting of our onions slightly awkward because I had to sort of give us a strange beveled surface there. Maybe, right? Yeah, I don't fully. I guess I'm less informed on the subject than I realized. Let's go check on our meat. So all we're looking for is for it to exactly release from the pan. Short rib is just a really wonderfully flavorful piece of meat. So my answer right here is I don't know. Um, Sloppy Joe meat, cheddar cheese, leftover white rice into a viable burrito. I mean, that sounds like burrito stuff to me. Burritos are one of life's greatest thing to throw leftover pile of stuff in. Okay, those are looking pretty good. We're going to likewise add them to our pot. We're going to keep that guy off the heat for the moment. Lid back on the pot, let it simmer away. Off the heat for the moment. Don't want to burn those things while I'm cutting other stuff. So, sliding back over here. None of the rest of this has to stew, so we can take our time. And in fact, we are encouraged to take our time. Because it gives more time for our peppers and meat to get their stew on and really both infuse their flavors into the liquid and also soften up. The biggest thing we're looking for is for them to soften up. You're out of other hot sauces, so tahini it is. I have some tahini. I don't find myself using it very often. I usually run into a case where the sourness of the tahini is more than I'm looking for. And that's kind of my beef with tahini. Not that there's any beef in tahini. Try cutting it this way. See what it does. Oh, this is much worse. Having to take out the middle of the onion like that really messes with its ability to dice normally. Tahini is best on fruit. I could see that, like on a mango or a watermelon. Bookwoman. Hi. Backing up right here with some of that bookly knowledge. Also, hello. Welcome, welcome. Good to see ya. Mole means sauce. Salsa also means sauce. So I'm sure there's some nuance to beyond that, but anyways, we are going to be adding a bit of, I'm not going to cut the remaining quarter of that onion. We're going to save it for garnish. I am going to be adding some bell peppers to this as well. Maybe just the one? It's quite a big bell pepper. It's quite a large bell pepper, so perhaps just the one. Cut it the chefy way. This is the chefy way of cutting a bell pepper. I see internet chefs do it, and they're like, this is the only objectively correct way to cut a bell pepper. And then I don't do it this way, and then my bell peppers come out fine. So, you know. Well, it tends to be a cooked sauce. Salsa tends to be a fresh sauce. There you go. All the knowledge of the world at our fingertips. Oh, Nana, you don't like bell peppers? That's... Well, as I said, to each their own. I'm a big fan of bell peppers. Make sure there's no sticker on this guy. I think we're just going to go with the one bell pepper. I don't think... I did grab two, but I think based on the size of what else I've got going on, we're only going to use the one. They're great when they're not green. Huh. Interesting. I specifically chose green. They had yellow, orange, red, and striped available. And I chose green because the color contrast, it's going to be the only thing in here that's not some shade of red and brown. I do think that in order of sweetness, green is the least sweet, followed by red, followed by orange, followed by yellow. That's purely anecdotal on my part, but it's what I feel. So if I'm going for sweetness, I feel like, okay, scratch that. I don't think the yellow ones are sweeter. I think they're less pepper flavored. They're as sweet as like the red and orange ones, but they have less of the pepper, of the vegetable-y pepper flavor with them. And I think that's what sets them apart. And then I think the green ones are distinctly less sweet. Although not dramatically so. Well, yes, green ones are if you get a green one and hang on to it for a while, it's going to turn colors. I've done that many a time. They definitely do continue to ripen. And most of the green bell peppers you encounter are just one of the other colors that hasn't turned colors yet. It's the same thing with jalapenos. Green jalapenos will turn red if you let them. And part 3. Celery. I'll take the little dried off bit off the front. Take a little that thing off the back. I am including celery. I'm including celery for the same reason I include celery in the ragu, which is essentially the same technique I use to make chili. We're not adding nearly as much of it as we're adding the pepper and onion, but we are adding it for that aromatic flavor. Throw it in with the peppers. And yeah, I'm just going to throw in the one rib. One rib, a little bit of flavor. We need the garlic. Here's where you learn I abhor celery. Oh my. Abhor is a strong word. We're using 5 large cloves of garlic. The remaining garlic can live in the little garlic house. Little garlic house. Get the most of the paper off. I definitely used to not like celery, and I still really don't like celery by itself. I don't think it's a good snacking vegetable. I think it has a very herbaceous flavor. But like some other things I would not consume by themselves, I think it does a good job in the mix with other things. Well, this thing takes a lot of the effort out of doing garlic by removing the papers for me. Also, hi, Peaky. And hi, Mags. Welcome, welcome. Hello, hello. How's it going? Good to see you. Having this thing to really remove the papers. Selena, hello, hello, hello. Congratulations, you're not first. No one can take that away from you. So this thing, just a plastic tube or silicone tube, it's got enough of a grip to it that when you roll it over a clove of garlic, it causes the peel, the paper, to shear off very easily. Take the little root bits off. You say I need a garlic press. You mean like that? We are using a garlic press, but you got to get the paper off. You don't necessarily have to take the little root bits off, but I like to take those off as well. Oh, we're talking to Peaky. Hi, Bob. Yes, indeed, your favorite garlic press. This one. We're doing the garlic well enough in advance, as always, to ensure that it has time to develop its flavors before we need it. And again, we're not in a big hurry today, so lots of time to do stuff in advance. How's it going, Bob? I find the peel, if you're doing more than one clove at a time, the peels obstruct the little holes at the bottom of your garlic press, and you gotta dig the peels out. Whereas this way, I can just load this thing up over and over again and push through and push through and push through. The papers are actually edible if you want to leave them on. They just have a terrible texture, like paper. They actually, you can save the papers of garlics and onions and use them in stock or soup. Because they still have a lot of flavor in them. It's just, again, they have this terrible paper texture. You love this garlic press. I love this one too. The fact that the pressing thing is fully round makes it so nice to press stuff through. It doesn't squirt out the sides. It still kind of squirts up the top, but and apparently you can still get this press at IKEA. Someone told me. One of you told me. It was one of you who told me, oh yeah, I got that one at IKEA. And then you can use a knife to scrape it off. Don't use the blade. Use the back. Scraping with the blade, bad for the blade. Won't really hurt this thing, but it can do a number on the edge of your blade. Okay, quite a lot of garlic. Our unbalanced aromatics. Oops. You put macaroni in the soup. I'm not sure what my start direction is going to be. The way did I cut myself off or did I finish my thought? Now I can't even remember if I said this already. I was thinking of rigatoni. I was thinking of rigatoni as the starch option to go with this, because the way I'm building it is rather a chunky soup, a stew, and that's where like a rigatoni thrives, is with those sort of this size chunky stuff that can get caught up in the holes and otherwise polenta still my my go-to I think if I want to prep anything else right away before I soldier forward. We have tomatoes, beans, and spices remaining. I thought I was going to get away with no additional oil, but clearly that's not the case. So I'm adding a little bit of oil. I'm going to want to grind the cumin and some black pepper. Cumin. You could throw in some coriander. What do you think? What do I eat chili with? Well, I just said, I typically serve it, my go-to is with polenta. Polenta is the starch base that I serve the chili with. Many people eat chili by itself, plain. It usually is served with some kind of a starch, a neutral starch. Thus the discussion of noodles, macaroni noodles, polenta, cornbread, because it's rich, protein, savory, very flavorful. So having sort of a neutral starch on the side makes a lot of sense. Okay. A little bit of extra oil, turns on the heat, pulls down our grinder, and we're gonna be quite a few spices, so I think we're gonna build our spice pile on a plate today rather than in a bowl, because there's gonna be quite a bit. Oh, that's right. I'm gonna cut an herb from my front window. Things have moved from the back garden to the front window because we've had a few frosts. This herb right here. I got out the dry oregano, but I don't need the dry oregano. That heat up a little bit. This guy. This is my Cuban oregano. It is actually unrelated to oregano, but it has a very similar flavor. It has these thick, succulent leaves. I had sprouted a little extra one from a cutting, and I brought this one in time to avoid the frost, and I forgot about the cutting one, and it got frosted just one night, immediately turned brown and died. This stuff is definitely not winter hardy, not even a tiny, tiny bit. The very first frost completely killed the one that was out there. So heads up if you try growing this stuff. I think we're going to throw it in when we throw in the. This is the parent plant, and this one's much larger. And I brought this one in on time. I think we're going to put this in with when we put in the garlic. This is inspiring you to try cooking. I always encourage people to try cooking. Pick something you like. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's the biggest thing. People will be like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then they will not go forward because they're afraid of making a mistake. Basil's like that too. I find that basil can handle a little bit of frost right on the edge. Doesn't immediately kill the plant. It doesn't like it. It definitely starts to droop. But the plant doesn't usually die completely instantly. This thing died like instantly, which was unfortunate. Jen. Hi, Jen. Oh, hey. You know who streams sometimes? And is also literally my only moderator. Because I always forget to offer it to anybody else. How's it going, Jen? It's been a minute. Cooking this specifically. You can try cooking this specifically. Chili is super, super customizable. At its absolute base, it is peppers stewed with meat. Chile con carne. That's what that means. Peppers with meat. And it's this slow, savory stew. Doing it with whole meat, definitely not required. You can use ground meat. Doing it with fresh chilies, definitely not required. Most recipes you'll encounter ask for chili powder instead. Chili is very, very free form. I think the only thing that chili has to have is pepper. If you get rid of the pepper, then you've gotten rid of the chili. Flamingo! Oh my god, everybody's turning up. Everybody's here. It's the time. It's the time when y'all get here. Rough couple of months. Sorry to hear about that. Right. Check out Flamingo. Sorry, that came across as condescending. Sorry to hear you've been having a rough time. Glad to hear things are getting a bit better. I feel like a lot of people have had a rough time of late. And as for the reason, gestures broadly at the world. Some have beans, some don't. The most baseline of chili, if you go back in the tradition, in the super tradition, it again is a stew of chili peppers and meat. Chile con carne. But, as I was talking about right at the beginning, beans are an affordability pick. They're excellent for adding some substance without adding a lot of money. And that was true in ancestral Mexico just as much as it's true now. So go ahead and add beans to your chili. The chili should not have beans in it is a snobby thing that comes from Texas specifically. And if you're making your chili for a particular purpose, I would say some of those purposes do not want the beans. I don't really like the beans for the chili that goes on a chili dog because they're too chunky, they're too lumpy. I also wouldn't use this chili with big chunky pieces of meat on a chili dog. For that, I would 100% use ground meat because then I can get it really fine, really small, so that you can get it as a sauce. Turns it into a sauce. Those guys, salted, lightly oiled. We're going to simmer them down like we would with a mirepoix. Glad I did not add a second pepper. That would be too much pepper. And now we have to think about what liquid we want to deglaze our pan with, because we are going to deglaze that pan with something. Ryuya recommended red wine earlier. What have I got? I have a Chardonnay. I have a Sauvignon. I have sherry. I have a sangria. Beer would be good. I don't have a beer right on hand. What do you feel about a sangria? Red wines go with beef, so I'm not opposed to red wines. I do have a white wine. I have two sherries, actually. No, I have two different sherries. A dry sherry would also be a white wine that would give us some complexity. If I had tequila, I would give it a splash of that. But yeah, I also thought of beer. Didn't grab a beer. Don't have a beer. Can't do beer. Might be a little sweet. Again, you don't need a ton of whatever your thing is to do a deglaze. So I don't know that would be a big problem. It would add a tiny bit of sweetness to our finished dish, but it's just a splash in the pan. I guess the one concern is that the sugars might re-burn at the bottom. Well, I don't have any tequila. I also didn't plan for that. I said if I had tequila, I'd be using tequila. Our thing is getting a little bit dry, so I'm adding water, which, honestly, water is also a deglazing agent and is always an option. I also have some neutral grain spirits if we just wanted to go with that. Everyone's worried about the sweetness. Everyone's worried about the sweetness. Guys, there's sugar in tomatoes. There's sugar in onions. We do this to our onion, carrot, celery mixture to wake up the sweetness, to bring some sugar to it. 2 tablespoons of sangria is not going to make this into a candy chili. Wow. Guys. Pita bread dipped in chili. Yeah, I could see that. Pita or a naan or those sort of thick, chewy flatbread type things. I could definitely see that. I made that. Oh God, 2 years ago now. I think I made zalouk and cobs, and cobs is a Moroccan thick, chewy bread meant for dipping into your stewed things. Zalouk being a stewed tomato, pepper, eggplant thing. Less soup, less of a soup, more of a dip, but it's the same flavor profile. Uh, the oregano. Let's see how our thing is doing. It's stewing away. I think we're going to probably need a little bit more liquid, but there are tomatoes coming up and they have liquid. So I'm going to not immediately dump a bunch more water in there. I definitely crowded the pan with the vegetables here. Let's take our Cuban oregano, plunk it in the middle there. And our garlic, plunk it in the middle there. Push it around, let it start to get a little bit fragrant. I'm going to take the opportunity to see what my phone said. My phone said nothing. There's no notification. It was something on your Steam wish list is on sale. Thanks, phone. I really needed to hear about that. Stir this around, get our garlic nice and fragrant. You know what? Because y'all bad-mouthed it so much, because y'all poo-pooed the idea so much, if you're not aware of what I'm doing, of what the deglazing process is, the stuff that was sticking to the bottom, the brown bits that I was calling fond earlier, will stick to the bottom of your pan. And the way to free them up is to splash some liquid and then scrub them off the bottom with something. Spatula, a wooden spoon, something. And then they'll get picked up into that liquid and you will get the flavors of those brown bits into your dish. This is called deglazing. And before the era of nonstick pans was how you cooked, and is why many dishes call for some kind of liquid splash after you do a saute. And of course, you could use water, but using something that has its own flavor adds more flavor. I hope my pot's big enough. Boy, I hope my pot's big enough for this. I don't think I'm going to need the saute pan, so we can move this guy to the front. Because I still want to add a can of tomatoes and a can of beans to that. And we need to have enough liquid in there that it can continue stewing the meats. We're going to add a few dry spices to it now, though. Parents said don't do it, did it. I'm going to put the lid back on. It's going to help us retain our liquid. You lose less liquid with the lid on. Dutch oven lids are supposedly, they don't always work depending on the specific design, but they are supposedly designed to help condensation drip straight back down into the pot instead of falling to the edges. Great for things like braises, stews, where you don't really want them to dry out. While that's getting started over there, let's slide over here. Tablespoon of cocoa powder. We've got quite a big volume going on back there, so we're going to be pretty generous with our spices. Gotta keep the heat under control as well. I don't want the bottom of that thing to burn, because that's harder to get it off. If you let it go all the way to burn, then it's hard to get those things off the bottom. Teaspoon. Teaspoon? Teaspoon. Teaspoon? Did I use my teaspoon? No. That's the half. Oh my God, why is it all the way back there? Teaspoon of cumin. Here's one that you might not see coming. Teaspoon of cinnamon. Maybe half a teaspoon of cinnamon. Cinnamon's quite a strong flavor. Maybe a third of a teaspoon of cinnamon. Cinnamon's quite a strong flavor, but again, we have a pretty large volume going on here, and cinnamon goes really well with rich, meaty flavors. I'm not using that grinder, I'm using this grinder. A little bit of salt to help the abrasive in there. We're just hand grinding some cumin. Oh, and you know what I forgot to throw in the pot is a couple of bay leaves. Leaves of bay. What do they do? Nobody knows, but you throw them in savory soups. They should have gone in right at the beginning to fully extract with the peppers. I just forgot about them. So let's pop over there, pop the lid off, and throw in a couple bay leaves. Trash is getting full. It knocked the bag off the lip of the bin. Okay. Oh, you guys need to come back. Come back over here with me. Do we want to add any coriander? Do we add coriander? Yes, but a smaller amount. A slightly under full teaspoon of coriander. And a slightly under full teaspoon of black pepper. Which can be ground together. And actually for those, we will use the grinder. The grinder. I love this thing. This thing was a great pick. This was a great pickup for my spice pulverizing needs. There you go. A quantity of ground black pepper and coriander. Anybody else want to go in the pool here? Yes. Just a little bit of cocaine. No, MSG. It's white on white, so it's hard to see, but that one's MSG. We can taste test it for salt toward the end. Salt isn't really an important one to get in now. We'll taste test for spice levels as well, and we can adjust that with some of my many hot sauce options later on. I've got some tahini. I've got paprika. I've got smoked paprika. I've also got ancho, chili powder, a couple other things. We can throw stuff at the wall if we need to. For the most part, I think I'm happy with where we're going. It smells great. It definitely needs a little bit more liquid to it. But we're going to take all those spices and in the pot. In the pot they go. Stir them in particular, cinnamon and cocoa don't really want to dissolve in the water on their own. If you don't stir them in, they'll just kind of sit on top. Very, very gradually and begrudgingly hydrating. Wow. The liquid part of our soup is a very opaque brown at the moment. And yes, I'm making a ton of this. I'm making enough for this that I could probably eat this all week. I'm a little worried about how much the tomato is going to take up in the pot, but that's the stage we're at where I'm going to have to add tomato. So we're doing that. And I suppose I'll put in part of it and see where it goes. Over yonder, we're using one of these large size cans. Really what I should have done is bigger pots. I do have a larger stock pot, and we could have been doing this in the large stock pot just to make a absolute dose. I don't know why I called it that, but that's where my brain went. Tomato. Which again we will stir in. Yep, we're running out of room. We're running out of room. Should have done it in the big stock pot. Lid back on will help it come back up to a simmer more quickly. It would be very awkward to transfer it out of the pot now or any time. So I guess I'm just going to have to make do with the fact that I've almost filled up my pot. Probably means I can't do 2 colors of beans. I have to do 1 colors of beans. I wanted to do black and white beans. I wanted to do black and white beans. I got black and white beans. But the way it's full up, the way it's become quite full, that might not be feasible. Okay, get some water on my garlic press to make sure it does not turn into a glued together mess. Half of each can and freeze the remainder. That's a possibility. Also, get shouted at. If you've been here, you already know Dinner with Mom. We've raided over there a couple of times. I end before they do, so they never get to raid over here. Go check them out. All sorts of good stuff. Just like what I cook here. And in fact, this chili stemmed from a conversation I was having with Mom over there about chili. I think my pot is too small. I think that is the thing I'm running into. The tomatoes will break down as it cooks and increase the liquid. it needs to stew down more. I haven't even tested if the meat is tender yet because I'm confident at this stage it's not. That's why I wanted to get the meat in first. I think the peppers are actually tender, so we maybe should have done the meat first and then thrown the peppers in just to give the meat another, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes head start. Although ideally the peppers are just mush. They just disappear into the liquid. I really want to get beans in there. I like beans in my chili. Oh, what the hell was that sound? It was a truck using its compression brakes. If I had a full-size pot, I would use 3 beans, black, white, and red. Those are the 3-bean chili. But I think our meat ended up taking more room than I was expecting it to. I think that's where I got thrown off. I should have just used the short ribs, I guess. I don't know. 1 pound to 3 cans of beans is very bean heavy. We also need to taste this a few times. We're at the stage where we should be taste testing our chili for seasoning. Where did I? There. There did I. Ooh. It's a little spicier than I was shooting for. Ooh, it's got some spice to it. Ooh. Ooh-wee. Those little peppers go a long way. A little pepper goes a long way. Glad I didn't add any additional spicy pepper to this. It definitely needs to simmer down. Based on its appearances, I think the white beans are going to look better by themselves if we end up only using one. We're going to drain them out too. So, ooh, it's definitely a little spicier than I was shooting for. Definitely a little spicier than I was intending. We're opening beans. We're opening both kinds of beans. I think serving this one with some cheese, some sour cream, definitely something starchy. This one isn't a eat by itself type of chili. Well, we'll see what happens after I've drained them, because first things first. We're taking them over to the sink and we're draining the juices. The juice definitely takes up a goodly quantity of the can, so there's a little bit less in there than than it looks like. roll that beautiful bean footage. Unfortunately, I don't have a sync cam, so we couldn't roll that part, but we can. But we can bring them back. There's probably just about as much bean here as there was meat, which honestly I think is a good balance. There's probably a little bit less bean there than there is meat, which I think is also a good balance. I don't want bean to be the primary in my chili. I want it to be a supporting player. Then we got to think about our starch. We got to think about our starch. I think based on how this pot has gone, there's no way we're going to be putting pasta in there. Not an option. There's just no room for it. I would need to transfer to the big stock pot, which means I could make pasta on the side or polenta, which would also have to be made on the side. And I probably have convinced myself that I want to do polenta. What do you guys think? Pasta on the side or polenta? Jen votes for polenta. This has to stew anyway, so we've got plenty of time to think and plan. Mom also wants polenta. Now it's very soupy as well. The tomatoes have given up a lot of liquid, which is good. I needed liquid. I think I'm going to take the top off a bit. Man, I overfilled this pot. Wow, I definitely overfilled this pot. Make sure nothing's stuck at the bottom. I don't think so. Feels pretty smooth down there. This is an eyes bigger than your stomach situation for sure. I put too much stuff in that pot. Well, with 2 votes, polenta wins. I was also sort of leaning towards polenta. So, let's do that. I'm going to put the lid back on this guy. I'm going to swap him back over. Nope, not that one. Swap him back to the corner so I can make the polenta on the front burner. Okay, you guys were looking at a bowl of beans that whole time. What was I thinking? I want to get those beans in there. They need to cook down a little bit too. We're coming back to the front burner. We're going to see how many beans I can get in this pot before the pot gives up on me. If we can get to all of them, I will be shocked and pleased. But it's looking like maybe half. Ooh, it might just barely fit. No, I think that's it. I think if I go any higher, the lid is going to touch the soup. Oh, but we're so close. Oh, we're so close. I did it. I did it. I put all of them in there. I did it. I put all of them in there. Yeah, I'm probably going to eat this all week. I'll take it to work tomorrow. I'll have lunch later in the week. Chili is good for making a big batch. I just kind of, at this point, wish I would have done it in a bigger pot. There is still some liquid that is going to end up cooking off. So, in that regard, because it's a little bit too soupy for me at the moment. Yes, I could definitely freeze some of this. So I'm going to let it come back up to a bubble with the lid off to let it lose some of its moisture. Lose some of that liquid. We got two. Boy, we filled that pot. Ooh wee. Okay. I haven't had any recipes pulled up thus far. You know what happened? You know what really happened today? Why I've overfilled this pot? It is an eyes bigger than your stomach situation. I have eaten so little today, and it was a problem when I was shopping for ingredients. I was like, ooh, that, ooh, that, ooh, that. Because I was hungry. And I'm hungry now, so I keep adding stuff to this. So I used 3/4 of that white onion instead of half that white onion. I used the biggest bell pepper that I could get my hands on instead of a medium-sized bell pepper. I threw in a second portion of meat when 1 pound probably would have cut it. That's what happened. That's 100% what happened here. Let's taste this juice. It's actually less spicy than it was the first time. Still spicy, very cuminy. It needs to thicken up. It tastes a little bit on the watery side. And the tomatoes need to cook out. And honestly, it could use a little salt. Not too much, but a little more than it's got. So we'll add a decent pinch of salt. But yeah, I definitely have chili to go around for later, to share perhaps. What was I making? Polenta. I'm losing my mind. I am pulling up a reference now for polenta just to remind myself proportions and stuff. 4-to-1, some butter and some cheese. 4-to-1, some butter and some cheese. Oh, well, they're doing it as a whatever. See, I need to open a fresh thing of cornmeal. And a bowl. Polenta is ultimately cornmeal mush, grits. They're not exactly the same, but they are so close that they are pretty much the same thing. So that's half a cup of cornmeal. And then it is 4 parts liquid. And I'm going to put 3 of them in the pot to come to a boil, and 1 of them to hydrate the cornmeal on this side so that when it goes into the pot, it doesn't clump. Corn likes to clump. Corn likes to clump up when you put it in hot water. It's the same phenomenon with cornstarch. The reason you hydrate your little cup of cornstarch before you throw it in there, otherwise it'll form little lumps. But if you hydrate it in advance, before it hits the hot cooking liquid, it does not form the lumps. And then it's 1.5 cups for that guy, which I will bring over here rather than trying to awkwardly carry water across the kitchen to it. And I think that's what sets polenta apart from grits. I guess I'm making grits. Bring water and salt to a boil. No, I'm making whatever. I'm making cornmeal the way I make cornmeal. Pinch of salt. Heat on. Come to a boil. Grab some butter. That part I 100% agree with, is that you need some butter. So the water's coming to a boil, the butter, two tablespoons of butter, and then they usually call for, to make polenta, it calls for cheese. To make grits, it typically doesn't. And I guess that's another thing that sets them apart. I kind of want to use milk powder. Let's see, 1 cup. A quarter cup. So half of a quarter cup is 2 tablespoons. 2 tablespoons of milk powder into my wet cornmeal. Mimics the effect of having done it with milk.